It's now been 20 years since the death of Eddie Guerrero. He died on November 13th, 2005, at the age of 38. It was Chavo Guerrero, Eddie's nephew, who found him unconscious in his hotel room in Minneapolis. Eddie had passed out in his room while he was brushing his teeth. I wanted to make this video to commemorate Eddie's death as it's now been 20 years. I still remember where I was when I first found out about the horrible news. A family member had actually told me, and I was still a kid. I was a big wrestling fan, and I really didn't understand it at that time. It was difficult for me to process, and I even remember talking with other kids the following day at school that maybe it was all a work. We were very naive. We thought he might come out on Raw that night. And then when I was in shock on that Sunday, I really couldn't understand it when I first heard it. I thought, well, and I know he's had a lot of problems with drugs, and I knew he was actually released a few years ago and then he came back, but I really didn't. It was difficult for me to understand because I've been watching this guy every week on my television screen for years, and by the way, he was having some great matches before he died, and I was thinking, no way, Eddie, he's fine, we see him every week, what happened? It really became real to me when I watched that Raw and I saw all the wrestlers crying on stage. I will never forget that. By the end of that Raw, it really hit me, and to be honest, I really hadn't I didn't necessarily experience too much death in my life at that time, so it really showed me what people actually grieving is like, and it was just really sad. It's a Raw and a SmackDown that I'm never going to forget, that's really stuck with me, and seeing those reactions, some of those wrestlers really taking it hard, it was really sad. Some of the tributes that stood out for me were Chavo, of course, talking about his uncle, who they were really like brothers, that's what he would say. Rey Mysterio actually took off his mask for Eddie during his tribute for Eddie, and that's out of respect. And the one that really sticks out, the one that I really do remember, and probably what I remember most about the tributes for Eddie, was Chris Benoit. His tribute for Eddie was very heartfelt. Chris was extremely emotional. He was bawling his eyes out. Eddie was his best friend, and I just felt so bad watching that. I felt so bad for Chris watching that, and I just thought, wow, even at that age, I was thinking, should this even be on TV? And really, it shouldn't have been, looking back, and it was, yeah. Whenever I think of Eddie, I soon think of Chris, and that whole period from Eddie's death to Chris, what he did in 2007, it's just such a dark period for me when it comes to wrestling, and it was just really bad. That was a year and a half. Their deaths are separated, basically. But you can't talk about one without talking about the other. And this video is about Eddie, but maybe in a year and a half, in 2027, if I'm still doing videos, I might do a 20-year tribute on the Benoit tragedy. But this is going to be about Eddie, this video. I remember the tributes continuing for Eddie on SmackDown. The show opened actually with Batista, who was the world champion at that time, and he actually came out driving Eddie's lowrider to the ring, and Batista's very emotional. I remember that. He puts the belt down on the lowrider for Eddie. It was a great tribute. And that SmackDown show hit hard too, as it was Eddie's show. Eddie was a SmackDown guy. He was one of the members of the SmackDown 6. Never on Raw, really. He was SmackDown, and since that brand split, that's what he was. So that was his show. And I want to talk about some of my favorite memories of Eddie, most of which took place on SmackDown. The lie, cheat, and steal gimmick always made me laugh. Always got a good chuckle of it. How he would get his opponents disqualified. How he'd use a chair. He'd bring a chair in the ring, give it to his opponent, go down. When the ref gets up, the ref thinks he got hit with the chair. He always sold it so well. He was just so charismatic and so entertaining that, like, no matter how many times he did it, it never got old to me. And as a kid, I just thought it was the funniest thing. Eddie just had so much of a personality, and he was just such a good entertainer. Some of the other moments in particular that really made me laugh was when he put X-Lax, I think, in the Big Show's burrito, and Big Show has to go to the washroom, and like he's in the bathroom stall, and Eddie's mocking him. Just freaking hilarious. And all I knew was, wow, Vince must have, that was written for Vince, as he loves potty humor. And I'm a kid who thinks potty humor is funny because I'm a kid, and I'm laughing my ass off at that. I just have so many fond memories of that period of SmackDown in early to mid 2000s, and of course Eddie's a big part of it. Another one was when he trashed JBL's hat when they were feuding. He took it around the fans, and like they threw popcorn in it, water in it, soda in it. And that was actually a really good segment, really funny as well. I also remember his return in 2002 when he attacked Rob Van Dam on Raw. I think this was a couple weeks after WrestleMania. They feuded for the Intercontinental Championship, and Eddie went on to win the IC title at that Backlash show. That was after WrestleMania in 2002. And Eddie had been released earlier in November of 2001 after a DUI. I remember him being off TV for a while, and it was actually due to rehab. So when he was released, I wasn't necessarily shocked because he was never on TV, but I really didn't know about it because that wasn't on WWE.com or WWF.com at that time. So when he came back, I thought, all right, he's just coming back. I didn't actually know, because I was a kid, I was really young, that he was actually released. So another memory is him having the Latino Heat gimmick with Mamacita, China. They were great together. They were golden together. They just had so much good chemistry. They were very entertaining. They feuded at first, but then when they became a duo, it was just really entertaining. And how could we forget one of the greatest debuts of all time when the Radicals debuted on Raw on January 31st, 2000. So the group consisted of Chris Benoit, who I always assumed was just the leader, Dean Malenko, Perry Saturn, and of course, Eddie Guerrero. Those guys were great. They made a big move from WCW, and it was one of the best debuts of all time. It's very remembered, very talked about. It was great seeing them in WWF, and they all, Chris and Eddie, of course, went on to have just incredible careers and were treated much better in the WWE than they were in WCW. In 2004, this is going forward a bit, but I remember when Eddie won that number one contenders battle royal on SmackDown to face Brock Lesnar for the WWE Championship at No Way Out, and I never took him seriously to win the belt. I saw Brock is the top guy, no way. Eddie was just done feuding with Chavo when he won the feud. They had a match at the Rumble, I believe, and I don't believe he was in that Rumble, but he was they were part of the tag team Los Guerreros, which I really liked. I thought they were a very entertaining tag team. And when they feuded, it actually involved Chavo's dad, Chavo Classic, and they had a good feud. But he goes on from that. He wins the Battle Royal, and he's going to face Brock. And I'm thinking, no way he's beating Brock. And I just didn't think he had a chance. I did not think there was any way Brock would lose. Brock had just feuded with, I think it was Hardcore Holly at the Royal Rumble, and he won. I thought, all right, Eddie's just another match for Brock, and he's going to go face Goldberg for the title at WrestleMania 20. And they were building up Brock and Goldberg for a while. So you have No Way Out. It's Brock and Eddie. The match happens, and near the end, the ref takes a bump. Goldberg comes in, and he spears Brock Lesnar as they were feuding. Eddie then goes to the top rope, hits the frog splash. 1, 2, 3. Eddie Guerrero is your new WWE champion, and I could not believe, as a kid, I could not believe what I was watching. I thought Brock was a lock for sure. It was like a real WTF moment for me. I was thinking, no way, Eddie's the champion. But it was a really cool moment as Eddie's celebrating. He's very emotional. He's hugging his family. And looking back, I kind of wish I was a little bit more appreciative of what I was seeing because I really didn't understand. I thought, wait, what? Brock lost? I didn't think it could happen. But looking back, I wish I was more appreciative as, he would pass away less than 2 years later. And he had a good title reign, even though it was, it bared so much stress on the guy. Whenever they would have a host that wasn't sold out, he would take it personally, and he was that title reign really. I think it definitely took some. I hate to say it like this, but I think it had more of a negative impact on him as a person because he was just so. All I heard from the stories was he would just. he had the weight of the world on his shoulders with that title run. And I think that's Chavo described that one. So in a way, the fact that it wasn't too long, he was champ up until JBL beat him at the Great American Bash. That feud, it was definitely Eddie. They did some things where I think JBL attacked Eddie's mom and stuff, so it was memorable in that way. But probably the most memorable part was that Judgment Day when Eddie took that chair shot to the head from JBL, and I don't know what Eddie did. He must have hit a vein when he did the blade job, because he is just bleeding like crazy. He was just bleeding like profuse. It's like, what the hell? He must have hit something hard. I was actually worried because, I remember watching it thinking, oh, something happened here. He must be really hurt. How can he be bleeding that much? But in addition to so many of the moments Eddie provided, he was also a great wrestler, if you didn't know. And I'd be remiss not to talk about some of his greatest matches and some of his best feuds too. In 2004, after he won the belt, his first feud was Kurt Angle, and they had a match at WrestleMania 20. I thought they had a great match, and they had another really good match at the following year, SummerSlam in 2005. The following year, SummerSlam in 2004, they actually had a rematch. Eddie won the first one, Kurt won the second one. It was both matches were really good, and I thought they had good chemistry together, him and Kurt. He also had some great matches with Edge, and I think Edge was his most underrated opponent because they worked really well together. I think most people, when they think of Eddie, they'll mention his feuds with Ray and Benoit, but I think the feud with Edge was great on SmackDown. As I mentioned, the feud with JBL was memorable as well. Then he had so many matches with his best friend Chris Benoit. All of them were memorable. They had a really good one on ECW on that One Night Stand show in 2005. Numerous others they had, and it's tough to look back because of Chris Benoit, but those two guys they were at the top of the level in the ring. I mean, they took it it was so serious to them. They were so intense how they worked. They were just at the top level in the ring, top of the line. He had, I think his best opponent, my opinion, is Rey Mysterio. The rivalry was great. They had a great feud and some great matches. Their most memorable match was not in WWE, probably. It was at the Halloween Havoc show in WCW in 1997. Both of them are great. Rey is just crazy in that match. Just a great match. But when they feuded in WWE, the first match was at WrestleMania 21 when both of them were the tag team champions. Rey won, and that caused Eddie to turn later. And I'll never forget the Dominic Mysterio storyline because it was so well done. Rey brought his son Dominic on TV, and Eddie would keep referring to this story, but he'd never finish it. Rey would always cut him off. Finally, Eddie tells Dominic that he's his father, and he supposedly gave away Dominic to Rey and his wife. Because he couldn't raise the kid for some reason, I'm not sure, but that was the storyline, and I still remember Dominic's reaction, him being shocked, him running off into the crowd, Rey crying. It was such a memorable storyline, and there was even a segment on SmackDown where they're deciding custody over Dominic, and this is funny because only in professional wrestling would something like this ever be suggested, but Eddie says that him and Rey should have a match, winner gets custody, and it seems like Rey's about to agree to it, and then they had a woman playing a social worker in that, and she just cuts them off. Her reaction is priceless. She is just so disturbed they would say that, and I think that's the same reaction that every mother has to wrestling when their kids watch it for the first time. I just remember that really sticking out. That was really memorable, her reaction to it to me. Then they had the ladder match for custody of Dominic at SummerSlam, and that match I think gave us the introduction of Vicky Guerrero, Eddie's wife, and she was late making her spot in the match, so Eddie is pissed. He is cussing her out, and he was just so mad. The reaction was priceless, and it was unintentionally hilarious, but Eddie, man, he got mad. Eventually, they did it right. Vicky knocks Eddie off the ladder. Ray wins. He regains custody of Dominic, and Vicky herself goes on to have a nice career for herself as the general manager of SmackDown. She had a La Familia gimmick with Edge, and she was a manager for a while after that, if I remember correctly. But she had a good career, a good, nice career after Eddie's death. And Dominic even referenced a feud last week on Raw when he was in the ring with Ray, his father. And Dominic has had a good career that's really spawned from that feud, and it helped Ray too, because after Ray, he got the big push after Eddie's death, and that feud elevated him. He went on to win the title at WrestleMania 22. So that, to me, I really love that feud that they had. Eddie eventually wins the feud. People don't remember that because the ladder match happened at SummerSlam, but they actually had another match on SmackDown. It was a steel cage match, and Eddie won. He beats Ray in the cage, and then he was supposedly going to win the title back because I think Batista was hurt at that time. If maybe I'm getting the timeline mixed up, but I think Batista's hurt. And he eventually gave up the belt. I'm not sure if it happened before or after Eddie died. But they had a match with he had a match with Batista at No Mercy, and Eddie lost the match. But it seemed like they were going to continue the feud, and he was going to turn on Batista like he had turned on Ray, and he kind of turned babyface again after the Ray feud. But it seemed like maybe they were going to have him turn on Batista again. But Eddie, when he passed away, he was still a babyface on the roster, and it would have been great to see him have another title reign, but the problem is the first one stressed the guy out so much from all the things I've heard from interviews, people talking about it, so I don't know if it would have been best for him. But then again, we look at what happened, how he passed away. We will never know if he was actually going to have the title match, another title reign again. I think it was actually Stephanie McMahon who referenced that on him becoming champion again in her tribute to him on Raw. But I believe Batista disputed this in his book, so I'm not sure. I guess we're really never going to know if he was going to be champion again. He died unexpectedly at the age of 38. His legacy, however, is still celebrated to this day, 20 years later. Whenever someone does his Three Amigos, all the fans break out in a loud Eddie chant. He was absolutely loved by his family, his peers, and the fans. The fans still loved him to this day. They still chant his name. He had that much of an impact. So much in WWE changed because of his death. We got the wellness policy the following year because Eddie had died, and I don't think it was really enforced to a much higher degree until after the death of Chris Benoit and the events that unfolded there. But the story is really... The Benoit story is forever linked with Eddie because... I'll just say this, maybe I'm completely wrong, but I always believe this in my heart. If Eddie Guerrero had never died, Chris Benoit wouldn't have done the horrific things that he did. I always believe that, and I'm always going to believe that. I think it really had such a profound, just a horrible impact on Benoit, and the whole thing's just very sad. Through all his struggles in life, of course I'm referring to his drug use and all his demons, his tribute song that WWE did for him, the Johnny Cash Hurt song, perfectly defined both Eddie's career and his life. I hurt myself today. That's how it starts off, and I'll never forget seeing Eddie's face because all I thought was, wow, that's so profound. That defines Eddie to such a degree that it's hard to really state in words how powerful that was. He lied, he cheated, he stealed, but he also had the lasting impact that very few wrestlers will have after death. 20 years later, we're still talking about Eddie Guerrero. The fans still chant for Eddie Guerrero, and they'll never forget him. His family won't forget him, his peers will never forget him, and the fans won't either. We still miss Eddie. He was such a great entertainer, such a great wrestler, and R.I.P. Eddie Guerrero. Latino Heat.